Well, while we wait, my name is Jared Lyles. I want to welcome everyone to this month's Sustainability Commission meeting. Pardon me. As an icebreaker, what we want to do is, as people are coming in, just if you could drop your name, your organization, and let's see, we can think of a big icebreaker question here. So, favorite wintertime activities to do in the snow or just generally in the wintertime? You can pop it in the chat here before we start. All right. And I also want to take the time to just let everyone know. So as we're waiting for confirmations of the new commissioners, which I see several of you all here, good to see you. I know that some of the older commissioners are, I've got a few messages saying if we're still required to come to meetings. We do ask that until everyone has officially transitioned and the new commissioners have been confirmed, that if we can get all the older commissioners to come in too, that would be awesome if you guys still have time. And also to share your knowledge and expertise with the incoming commissioners as well. Right, so I'm not seeing too many more people come into the chat. And I see a couple of responses of the favorite snow day activities. One from Natalie Cohen, playing with my dog in the snow. That's a fun one. I personally just like getting out and seeing all the neighbors when there's a big snowstorm and we shovel the snow together and get to chat, and you get to work alongside the neighbors and the neighborhood really comes out. I think the last time was one of the big snowstorms we had a few years ago. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Looks like most people are in. I'm going to hand it on over to Ava to give us some office sustainability office updates.
All right, thank you, Jared, and thanks for that icebreaker. I saw the cold weather cycling. Someone's really hardcore and committed. I very much respect that. Good evening, everyone. Really excited to have you all here at the January 2026 Commission on Sustainability meeting. Just some quick updates from the office. One is, as we've mentioned in the past, we're in the midst of our planning for the city's first watershed master plan, and we'll be having a few engagement events coming up over the next few weeks. The first will be in the Gwynns Falls area on February 10th, and then we'll have another one on February 12th. Focus on the harbor watershed, and we'll also have a virtual meeting on the 19th. As we've probably mentioned here before, but for many of you who don't know, this watershed master plan, it is a prerequisite for enhancing some of our flood resilience across the city, as well as allowing the city to achieve a higher rating under FEMA's community rating system, which kind of rates us in terms of what our flood preparedness and recovery capacity is. And I don't know if our team members working on this are on the call, but if you want to chime in and say anything, here's an opportunity to. I think I saw Doug come in. And if not, that's okay. So on the next slide, We want to let everyone know, especially if you're working with college or undergrad students, that the Chesapeake Conservation and Climate Corps applications are open. These are for either recent college graduates. These opportunities are for either recent college graduates or individuals who have not yet received a college application for the Climate Corps. We will be hosting members in our office as we are currently, and so we do just encourage folks that are interested to apply. And there will be a matching process that the Chesapeake Bay Trust supports. And so if anyone's interested or know young people that are interested in doing this work, please do encourage them to apply and get their applications in by March 6th. And so on the next slide, we have an upcoming event hosted by the Department of Public Works. Called Eco Loop. So this will be a really fun event, a really fun zero waste event. We're excited about it in the office, and really I'm excited to see our team in the Office of Waste Diversion and DPW hosting it. There will be all types of activities and events, from food scrap, cooking demos to a mending clinic, as well as education on how to compost, a clothing swap, and a creative reuse zone. It'll be a fun event. You definitely don't want to miss it. And please share it among your networks. I think this is one of the first of its kind events that DPW may have hosted in quite some time. And we hope to see more events like this. So for anyone that's interested, please sign up at the link. And again, please share among your networks. And then on the next slide, we have the annual Tree Baltimore Winter Gathering that's coming up on February 12th from 5:30 to 8. That'll be at Baltimore Unity Hall. Another really fun event that our colleagues in the Forestry Division of the Department of Recreation and Parks host every year. And so we also dropped that link in the chat, so please sign up and plan to attend. There's just so many exciting events going on right now or coming up. And then on the next slide, we wanted to highlight for everyone some dates to keep in mind. So the first one is on Thursday, January 22nd. There is an event not in Baltimore City, in Silver Spring, but it will feature area farmers in the region, such as Denzel Mitchell. But it's the 27th Annual Future Harvest Conference that focuses on urban growers and community gardeners. Really great event. And again, we'll have some of our local folks featured there. There will also be a zero waste hearing on January 28th at 10 a.m. This will be a city council hearing with the Public Health and Environment Committee, chaired by one of our commissioners, or our city council rep for the commission, Councilwoman Felicia Porter. And so if anyone's interested in learning more about zero waste and where DPW and the city are in that work, definitely encourage that you join that event. And then there's just some other general events coming up. There will be several different lobby nights happening in Annapolis during the legislative session. We just dropped one in here that's happening. There will be several others, so definitely look out for some of those. And then to our commissioners specifically, we'll be hosting a waste working group meeting. We'll be making specific recommendations as it relates to enhancing some of our waste work across the city. And so we'll send that additional details for that meeting out separately for the commissioners. Excuse me. All right, and then on the next slide, I'm going to pass it back to Jared to do the commission roll call.
Thank you, Ava. So I'll do a commission roll call quickly. Start with Mia Blum, our co-chair. She actually had to work event, so she's not here today. I am President Jared Lyles. Regina Boyce. Donzel Brown.
Present.
Phil Costa.
Here.
Lisa Pareto. I believe she sent a note saying she could not be there as well. Morgan Grove.
Here.
Okay, and Morgan, just as an aside, is our new co-chair in waiting. Nicolette Lewis-Saint.
Here.
Councilwoman Porter. Inez Robb, Stephanie Smith, and Ben Zychek. So I wanted to update everyone on the commission appointment process. So new commissioners or commissioners in waiting were introduced to the City Council on December 15th. Appointments can be confirmed after 3 council members, so that will put us in the date of February 9th, the third meeting in the cycle. After that date, the mayor's office is we'll coordinate with the mayor's office to schedule confirmation and share that information as it becomes available. But until then, until new commissioners are confirmed, we'll just ask that the existing current commissioners continue to serve and come to meetings. And let's see. So
Valerie, can you advance the slides? Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And then next slide.
So here's a list of topics for the upcoming meetings and that go along with the quarterly themes. And one thing we did want to mention is that we are having a schedule change starting in July, where our meetings will shift from Wednesdays from 4 to 6 to Tuesdays from 4 to 6. So that's coming up in July, and you can see that kind of bold line there that denotes the change in schedule. So just be aware of that.
And I'll send out updated calendar invitations so that folks don't have the old dates showing up on calendars.
And with that, I actually want to move on to a discussion. We opened up a discussion when our in-person meeting in December about subcommittees and within the commission and certain working groups. So I wanted to actually just open up or to review those committees once more, kind of explain the process for selection and assignment, and we'll talk a little bit more about the survey that's going to go out and Amy will be sending out a little later. So as we talked about before, we wanted to engage commissioners a little bit more and divide ourselves up into 3 committees or working groups, if you will, to tackle certain issues: a legislative committee, an events and engagement committee, and a resources development committee. Amy will be sending out a survey, as she mentioned, later this week to capture everyone's interest in these surveys, commissions. And we wanted to open it up just for a little bit of discussion amongst commissioners to see if they had any questions, comments, concerns about excuse me, the 3 committees and maybe how they can serve or function on them.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to express interest in the resource development and possibly the events and engagement committee. My background, I do have an extensive background with grants and finding funding opportunities and also hosting and promoting events. So I'm not sure if it's possible to be on both, but out of those 2, I definitely would like to be a part of.
Yeah. Thank you, Alicia. So yeah, we would definitely encourage you to, so how the survey will work is it'll be a ranked choice, and basically 1, 2, 3 choice, so everyone can hopefully get on the committee of their choice, but if not, we can work something out. We have, we discussed internally amongst ourselves even about different folks serving on more than one committee, or at least having a working group or having a collaboration with another committee, depending on the topic or what's going on. So yeah, if anyone else has any other ideas, questions, comments about that, we definitely want to open up the floor for that. And then we can have a more informed discussion too, briefly, after the survey comes out this week. We can see where the results are and then have a more robust discussion around that.
Well, Jared, Phil with the Convention Center, will there be chairs of the committees, or will there be staff partnership or somebody from the commission that is kind of the staff liaison, or is that going to be another nomination portion, or how will that work? Is that something you guys haven't flushed out yet?
Yeah, excellent question, Phil. So we were looking for people to take on a leadership role with the committees, and wanted to even use this time as a time if anyone wants to raise their hand and say that they might want to lead a committee or play a leadership role in one of the committees, or maybe if they wanted to work across both of the committees, we could at least take those comments right now and then collate them with the survey and have a more robust discussion next meeting about those. Is there one that particularly caught your eye, Phil?
I have interest in serving on said committee, but I will lead if necessary, but that is not my first choice. But I think the events committee was the first one that came to my mind for me personally. But I am not raising my hand to lead unless asked or if there's a need.
And you could put it in the chat if you want, rather than speaking up verbally. If you were interested in leading one of the committees. But we definitely did think that there would be a 1, 2, 3, however it works out, leaders for each of the committees. And Bill, you bring up a good point in terms of that there may be a staff person who would be connected to any one of these committees, and we hadn't discussed that idea or who that would, of course, then who that would be, and that's a great suggestion to consider.
Yeah, and I just generally, I am looking forward to having these. I think that will lead to more engagement and involvement from everybody. So thank you guys for leading in this direction.
Seeing a few hands go up in the chat. I think I saw Amy's first. And
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some additional background. We've discussed internally as far as Ava and the staff related to staff who would then support the various committees, and Ava plans to support the legislative committee. Natalie, who is doing a lot of the planning for the open house, is planning to support the without the slides, I can't remember what they're called, but the kind of the events and engagement committee. And then Valerie and I would be supporting the resource committee.
Amy.
And I hadn't originally planned on this, but I think I'm going to edit the survey before I send it out to allow for a comment box so that folks can provide additional context or information as far as if they have certain skills that they feel would align with a certain committee, and also if anybody has any certain limitations that would prevent you from serving on a certain committee. I know that some folks who in their professional roles have legislative work or restricted on involving themselves in legislative work. We want to make sure that we respect any kind of restrictions that folks have.
I am seeing your hand, Carly.
Hi, I was just wondering what the meeting schedule for the committees would look like. Will it be concurrent with these meetings or separate?
It would likely be separate, and we can determine that a little bit after. But we intend for these committees to be really separate working groups to focus on specific specialized issues. So, for instance, discussing a piece of legislation or planning an event or, again, finding resources. So definitely related to the topics of what we discussed in the main commission meeting, but those other meetings would probably be a more focused discussion just around a certain pivotal issue around the committee. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Right. So with that, we will look out for the survey again. If everybody can have, once they receive the survey, have it returned by February 2nd, and then we'll review the results. And I think probably it'd be a good idea to make some sort of presentation, see where everyone's interests lie, and then make an assignment and do some discussions from there after that. And with that, I want to hand it over to Kristen Harbison for the 2026 Maryland General Assembly Legislative Preview. There, Kristen. Kristen? Might have lost her for a moment.
Oh,
There
I'm
she
sorry.
is.
Were you looking for? I'm so sorry. I was being distracted from by my colleague who came in with something urgent. I thought I had a few more minutes. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to. Let me just pull up my slide deck. Thank you again for inviting me to join you again. Let me just share my screen. We go. Can you see my screen now? Cool, thank you. So for anybody who, I know that see some of my friends on the call, and I think there are some people who may not know me or Maryland LCV. For those who may not, Maryland LCV is a statewide nonprofit working towards a healthy environment for everyone in Maryland. We work to educate and activate people to take equitable and just political actions for clean water, healthy air, and climate resilient communities. We do that through both direct advocacy. We do it through accountability. Many people know us for our annual scorecard, legislative scorecard, as well as our biannual report card of the governor to hold our legislators accountable. We also work in elections to help get people elected when we need them to be elected, and to make sure voters are aware both to a C3 and a 501c4 capacity. So, and this legislative session has just started, so we're wanted to go through some of our priorities. So the first one, and you'll see many of the bills don't have bill numbers yet. They are still working their way through drafting. So there are really three bills I wanted to talk about. I know Marie Laporte is on from the Sierra Club, so she might be touching on some of these as well as a bottle bill, which is a community position. So I'll let her talk about that one. But starting with the Cherish Act. For people who might have been paying attention to legislative session last year, this is a really important bill. It was introduced last year by Delegate Jazz Lewis, and this year will be, and Senator Clarence Lamb, this year it will be introduced by Delegate Dylan Baylor, as well. There's one by Delegate Dylan Baylor, one by Delegate Andre Johnson, and both of those in the Senate are being carried by Senator Ben Brooks from Baltimore County. What it basically does is updates the ability for the departments, both Maryland Department of the Environment and the Public Service Commission, to actually use the data that they have about environmental justice conditions to make decisions about permitting. It did not get a vote last year, but there was a lot of work done between last year and this year to try to come together with the Department of the Environment so everybody can walk together in this. It would be an incredibly important step forward. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it's a really meaningful step forward, and it mirrors legislation that passed and has been implemented in other states, notably New Jersey. and this is of critical importance to Baltimore City, which has money. The neighborhoods have a high Enviro screen, have a lot of over pollution burden, and so this would impact the ability. This would allow the Department of the Environment and the Public Service Commission to consider those conditions before they make permit approvals. There are a couple of places there in a lot of this will have to do with sort of the port area in Curtis Bay and Cherry Hill. But I'll note also that in right over the city county line in Woodlawn is a data center, which also probably would have a data center proposal, which would probably be considered eligible for consideration under some portions of this bill. So it is, as I say, it's an incredibly important bill. It's going to be very difficult to pass. So any help that anybody can give to help us build pressure and build a drumbeat on the necessity of this bill would be very much appreciated. And again, there are two bills, one for the Public Service Commission, one for the Department of the Environment. Transportation Climate Alignment Act is another one that we're going one spore with feeling. It was introduced the last 2 years. It passed the House of Delegates both years. It's sponsored by Delegate Mark Edelson from Baltimore City and Senator Shelley Heddleman from Baltimore County. Again, it's been introduced before, and it requires the Department of Transportation for major projects, so over $100 million. These are significant highway transportation projects that they need to take a look at it and understand do an assessment of what the increased vehicle mileage travel will be for a project and the greenhouse gas emissions that would come with increased traffic. When they make that assessment, there are mitigation efforts to change the projects to be better projects, to better account for pedestrians and bicyclists and other mitigation efforts to reduce the impact of vehicle miles traveled, and maybe decrease the actual vehicle miles traveled itself, but providing better services for their communities. And then the third one is, and this is actually one that is nested under a much bigger bill. Today was a very exciting day in Annapolis because the budget dropped. The governor's budget was released at noon today. And so everybody's been turning over, trying to unpack all the different pieces of it. The environmental community as a whole, and when I say that, I'm talking about 50 or so organizations that work in statewide policy in Annapolis that come together as part of an environmental table known as the Community Coalition for the Environment, or Maryland CCE. We all decide together, we identify what our top priorities are for every session going in. Transportation Climate Alignment Act is one of the priorities. Cherish Act is one of the priorities. And the budget is probably the biggest priority. That is the one that we are starting and ending with. Because if we don't have a good budget, if the agencies are not funded appropriately, if our programs are not funded appropriately, then the environment is compromised. So we've been sort of looking through the budget to try to understand what they did and didn't do in the governor's proposal. For the most part, with some exceptions, the environmental agencies received generally level funding, which is good. All the agencies, if all the environmental agencies put together, being the Department of the Environment, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, and the Maryland Energy Administration, if you take all those budgets and the programs they run, put them in a pot and look at it, it equates to less than 1.5% of the entire budget, the entire statewide budget. So it is trivial amount. It's a minimal amount of the overall state budget, but it oversees and attracts billions of dollars of investment in Maryland, as well as protecting, of course, our health and safety. These are the agencies that keep us safe, keep our water safe, make sure that we don't have sludge running into our streams. these are safety agencies, and they're uniquely required to take care of our health and well-being in many ways. So we're all there for all of the budget programs, the budget agencies. We're there for the water funding programs, the Bay Restoration Fund, the 2010 Fund, program Open Space, which is so important for so many across the state. But the other one that Maryland LCV is really leaning in on especially is the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, which is a program under the Maryland Energy Administration. And for a lot of reasons that I could go into, but only it gets really wonky really fast, has an enormous amount of money in it. We're talking about $800 million in this fund this year. New money coming in this year. And that is a very attractive amount of money for the administration and the General Assembly when they're looking at a budget shortfall. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have level funding at least. This is a non-taxpayer generated source of money. It is ratepayer funded, but it's not taxpayer funded. This does not affect the general fund. This money is direct to communities and households for direct relief for programs like energy efficiency. This is where the energy assistance money lives. All kinds of things that directly help individuals bring down their energy bills. And if anybody thinks that that's not where everybody is right now, I don't know who you're talking to, because everywhere I've been, people are talking about their energy bills and that they're too high, and they are. So this is one of the places where projects or programs are kept that help people actually reduce their energy costs. They also work on statewide levels to support solar, battery storage, and all kinds of other renewable energy projects that are the fastest, cheapest way to build energy in the state. So this bill, we have the ask for the fiscal year 2027 budget, so this year. But this bill that's sponsored by Delegate Dana Stein is looking forward and saying for the next 4 years, we're expecting this unbelievable amount of money to come in on an annual level into the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. We want to make sure that at least level funding, at least $365 million, which is what was spent this fiscal year for these programs, that they continue to spend at least that much on climate funds, on climate programs. So this is, and again, a lot of this focuses on overburdened, underserved communities. That's implicit in a lot of the programs through the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. So I've been going through this very quickly. I'm very happy to answer any questions or go into any more detail on any of them. And anybody can reach out if you have additional questions. I can stop sharing my screen, but I also want to mention a few things, upcoming events that you might want to add to your calendars. First of all, Maryland LCV has every Friday at noon what's called our Friday Digest, which is half an hour on Fridays from noon to 12:30, where we go into detail on these issues. This Friday is the budget. So it should be a very dynamic conversation with two people who really understand the budget and how it works and how to best engage with it. So that's going to be a really good conversation this Friday. Next Friday, we have the brand new speaker, Jesseline Pena-Melnick, joining for at least part of that half hour, which is we're very excited for. If you don't know the new speaker, you don't know anything about her, you will really like learning about her because she's terrific. That's starting this Friday, and then every Friday on the 28th, January 28th is the Environmental Summit in Annapolis at the Senate Office Building from 4:30 to 6. And I'll put links to all this in the chat. That will be going through, again, more details on all of these priority projects, the budget, Cherish, TCA, and then the bottle bill, which I'm sure Marie will talk about. And so that will be a really great program. We'll see Comptroller Brooke Learman, Speaker Pena-Melnick will be there, several legislative leaders. So that's always a really good event. We like to bring people down so everybody understands the power of the environmental community and the environmental voice as we're going into legislative session. It's free to attend. Afterwards, we have what's called green drinks, where people can hang out and continue the conversation. And then I also want to flag that Maryland LCV also has a lobby day on February 16th, and we'd love to have you join us. So happy to answer any questions. I've been sort of rolling through this really quickly, but anything I can answer, any questions I can answer.
I had two questions about the environmental justice bill that you identified. You noted that the bill would look at data, and I was curious what kind of data in big forms. Is it looking at mapping environmental justice patterns, or looking at procedural? Those are two big buckets for environmental justice. One is patterns of environmental inequities, and the second is procedural. Will it look at patterns, and will it look at procedural kind of evidence for environmental inequity claims?
Right. This is very specifically about incorporating the EnviroScore, what used to be the EJ screen.
Yeah.
On Department of the Environment website. Like, the Department of the Environment has that data, and that data incorporates a lot of different metrics. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but if you go onto the Maryland Department of the Environment Enviro screen, you can see the sort of what the basic pollution load is as they've been by these metrics, and those metrics are explained on the Enviro screen. This bill hits for goes into effect for everything, I think, over 75, like for communities that have over, I think, 75 score on that. So these are the most polluted parts of the state. I'm not going to say that this bill is the fix for everything. It does not solve environmental injustices. It is a meaningful step forward, and it has been driven by this process has been driven by many of the communities, many of them in Baltimore City, but around the state, who are from these most impacted communities. So we are helping to work in the General Assembly, but it's the communities that are calling the shots.
Got it. As the bill advances, is it useful? So one of the places in the United States where the most work has been done academically on environmental justice is the city of Baltimore. And there's been a great deal written about the lags and legacies of environmental inequities in the city of Baltimore. Is it useful to have that academic work in support of the bill, or not?
I mean, I think that we'll take whatever we can get. I mean, if you have resources that you think would be valuable, by all means, feel free to share them. We have a lot of people from Baltimore City, some of the experts in Baltimore City, who are part of this. Last year, I believe we had academics from Hopkins talking about the health impacts of pollution in these communities. But I think that they're looking for any information they can get. This is an all hands on deck. As I say, this is hard. None of these things I'm talking about are easy bills. They're all very hard in different ways. So please, if you're interested in getting involved, please reach out.
Okay. Donzel has his hand raised.
Any other questions? Donzel?
Yes. I just want to encourage you to reach out to my organization, EJI, EJI.org. We do a lot of environmental justice research. We work with academia from Hopkins to the Smithsonian. We have a lot of data and also a lot of community testimonies about environmental justice. I think we might be helpful. And so I'd like to have a further conversation after that, if you'd like to.
Absolutely. I'm putting my contact info. I'm putting my email in the chat. I would encourage you to reach out to me. I'm working on this bill, but I'm not leading on this bill organizationally. Other people who are much more knowledgeable about the details and specifics are leading it in the organization. So I'd be delighted to make sure to connect you with my colleague Rebecca Rear, who is embedded and spends all of her waking days thinking about this bill. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I encourage you again to share our website with our colleagues, around the films that we made, the research we've done around air quality, water quality testing, and our partnerships that we're doing. I think it would be helpful, and this is all open source data that we're providing on a constant basis. So.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. If you can actually, I wasn't able to quite get your email contact, the website address, and I don't want to take up everybody else's time. So if you can either drop,
I'll send it to you directly.
That would be great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else with questions for Kristen?
Well, thanks again so much. I always appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you all, and please be in touch. We need everybody's help to get these very important policies completed.
Next, I want to hand it over. Thank you, Kristen. I want to hand it over to Marie Laporte of the Sierra Club, Maryland.
Thank you. I had intended to share a couple of documents, but for some reason I'm not able to see them while I'm trying to share them, but it's not important. We did send them in advance, so I'll just speak to them, and hopefully you all got copies of those, and if not, hopefully Ava or Amy can share those with you. So just very briefly, first of all, thank you for inviting Sierra Club to speak today and to share our priorities. As Kristen mentioned, we are also part of CCE, which is about 20 to 25 different environmental groups across the state. And we have actually aligned on a lot of our priority issues. Kristen already went through some of them, so I won't repeat them in the interest of time. I did want to mention, with regard to SEEF, there are, in addition to the energy, which is a huge thing for people's homes, which is really important, some other things that we're kind of missing when we're diverting this money in other places. For example, electrification of school buses. Many of you might be aware that many children suffer from asthma, and riding in a diesel-powered school bus contributes to that. There are many children who have asthma attacks on their way to and from school. I have a daughter who had asthma as a child and still does, and that was actually pretty unnerving sometimes on long school bus rides, that she was getting exposure and would need to use her inhaler, especially when she was really young. There are other things too, like low-income heat pump installations, induction stoves, etc., which make homes healthier. The other thing, that Kristen mentioned, but I just want to reiterate, is we passed the Climate Solutions Now Act as a state a few years ago. It was a very, very powerful and important bill, but it didn't lay out all of the steps we needed to take in order to achieve that. And so investing in SEEF and these projects are part of the roadmap to getting there. Same thing with the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act. We have to find ways to give people options to driving in a car. We have to have better public transportation. It's really what people want. People want walkability. If you go into other countries, like, in Europe, for example, walkable communities are the norm, not the exception, as is public transportation. So now I want to switch and talk a little bit about the bottle bill. Kristen did not talk about that one, and that has actually been led by Sierra Club for probably about a decade on and off. It is very frustrating that we have been working this hard for so long to try to get this passed. There are about 11 states, I believe, that already have this. I have lived in a state with a bottle bill. And when you live with a state where you have a bottle deposit, you kind of scratch your head and when you move someplace that doesn't and say, why not? It just seems so logical to us. So essentially, in Maryland, there are about 5.5 billion single-use beverage containers that we use every year in our state. That's just our state, 5.5 billion. And unfortunately, 3/4 of them end up in the environment. They either end up in landfills or as litter. So part of this is to try to increase recycling rates, but that's really not the biggest driver of this. It's really litter. Anybody who has gone on a stream cleanup or looked at the tremendous capture from the Mr. Trash Wheel family can see how much is left on the street. And if people have a deposit, even 10 cents, it is enough to stop that litter. If somebody does litter, there's usually somebody who will come along and pick those things up, whether it's school groups or just individuals or whatever. If you go into Europe where they have these deposits, you do not see all of the trash on the sidewalk, alleys, streams, etc., because they have these deposits. So currently our recycling rate is about 25%. If we had a 10% deposit, we would probably see about 90%. And one thing that isn't really talked about quite as much, there are tariffs now on aluminum. And aluminum is a very expensive material to create. You have to mine the bauxite, you have to smelt it, you have to get the aluminum out of it, which is very energy intensive. And it's very expensive to do that. And now we are importing that with substantial tariffs on top of that. So that's making our packaging much more expensive. So if we can get higher recycling rates here in this country, we can actually drive down the cost of that packaging. And it is a preferred package for many different people because of its functionality. But same thing with glass and plastic. We don't want that to be on the street. And glass is also really great for recycling. It makes it really easy. There's reverse vending machines. So, people can either take it back and, you put it in the slot and it ka-chings every time you put it in. You can even bundle it up in giant bags. And then there's a company that will send you back your money when you've deposited your bag. They count it all up and you get a credit on that. It's super easy to do. The state doesn't have to get involved into doing any of the logistics. There's a company called the Beverage Container Stewardship Organization, and they represent all of the manufacturers that sell the beverages. And lastly, there's even consideration for people who run the MRFs to give them some incentives as well, so that they're kind of, some of them are concerned that they might lose out on some recycling of aluminum. So there is an attempt to balance that as well in this. So it's a fabulous bill to reduce litter, to improve recycling. I grew up returning bottles as a child. Anybody who's kind of my age remembers doing that. Yes, I'm saying nodding heads. Yes, we lived in Chicago, and my mother had her little grocery cart, and we walked the grocery cart back and forth to the grocery store. We didn't have a car, which was not uncommon back then. And we put our soda bottles in the same container that we bought them in, and brought them back to the store, brought them to the service counter, and they gave us our money. Some kids were lucky enough to get that money themselves so they could buy candy, and my mom put it towards groceries, so I didn't see it. But it's really not that hard to do, and it's a great program to help with the environment. So anyway, I think that's all I have to say, since Kristen did such a great job of covering things. Oh, there is one thing she did not mention. When she talked about all of the cuts to the budgets, program Open Space is a very important program. Every time people buy a home or sell a home in Maryland, they're paying a fee. And they are told that fee is going to be used to create more open space for recreation and for enjoyment, conserving land, conserving historical sites in our state. But unfortunately, and this is not just the current administration, there's a long history of this, that, politicians have kind of raided that budget to the tune of roughly $1 billion over the last 20 years. So this is a lot of money. And while the program Open Space has done a lot of things, one thing I just did want to call out is that we have achieved the 30 by 30 already, which means conserving 30% of the land by the year 2030. But what is less known is only 2.67% of that land is really high in biodiversity and really protects a lot of our species. So if we're going to save the ecosystems, which are very complicated things, we need to have more than 2.67% of our land that's highly valuable for that to be conserved. So I think that's all I've got. Any questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to present on our priorities. And I hope that everybody will support them. And just one last thing is use Find My Representative, email, call your representatives. Please ask them to support these environmental things. They need to hear from you. They need to hear many people calling them to push them to vote in favor of these things to really make a difference. So please support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. So lastly, I would like to call on Dave Arndt from Climate Justice Wing Co-Chair, the Climate Justice Wing Co-Chair from the Maryland Legislative Coalition. You ready, Dave? Looks like you're still on mute, Dave.
I'm muting myself, but I can't hear you on your end. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Unfortunately, I can't hear anything on your end, so I don't know what just happened. So I will go and go through some slides, and hopefully I'm doing this right. So my name is Dave Arndt. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Climate Justice Wing, and about 2 weeks ago, we had our 7th annual Climate Legislative Summit, and I'm going to share some slides from that summit. And let me see if I get the right slides here. Okay, everybody see those? Okay. So I'm going to go through this rather quickly. So this is our legislative summit. We do this every year where we bring in legislators to before the session begins to really talk about key environmental legislation that they're going to have. The first day of speakers, we really had 7 legislators, plus we also had speakers like Brooke Learman, and then we also had people from the Maryland Energy Administration, and then we had a deep dive on nuclear. All these presentations and slides are available on our website, which you can see at any time that you want, and I can put that into the chat when I get the chat here. So you can download them and see everything, and you can watch them play. So if we look at just some of the initial things, and a lot of these bills have been covered before by Kristen and Marie, but there's a lot of bills that we had. Some are on data centers, and what do we do with data centers? How do we manage data centers? And some of it is dealing with taxation of data centers. So I'm just going to go through those really quickly, and then you can go through this and look at the slides themselves. We also had updates on how do data centers get their money and the tax credits that they use, and legislation that is going to alter that. Right now, currently, data centers get tax exemptions for the equipment that they buy, and we want to really put some guardrails around that, or put some restrictions, because data centers can use more electricity than the city of Baltimore, and utilize and spew out all these greenhouse gases. And if we ever are going to make our sustainability goals, we've got to make sure that if a data center is being put in the state of Maryland, that it's using clean energy as one of the things that it's using. There was bills to consider for us to leaving the PJM. The PJM is our grid. It's a group of 13 states that belong to this. And right now, as you can see, our electrical prices are rising. A lot of this is being caused by the PJM. And so we're looking at how we can actually better work with them, and work with them on making sure that they're providing low cost, reliable energy that is actually sustainable. So that's one of the bills being delivered out there. Unfortunately, as Kristen had mentioned, a lot of these bills really have not been fully introduced, so we don't have any numbers for them. So as they go into the system, the Maryland legislative system, you'll be able to see those numbers. Right now, we know of about 15 environmental bills out there, but by the time the session is over, there's going to be 300 to 400 of them. So there's a lot of things to be out there looking for. So go quickly. There's another one on advanced transmission technologies. So right now, we've got a lot of transmission lines running through the state of Maryland. Most of them are using old, antiquated technologies for putting the electricity on those wires. What we really are asking to do is to making sure that it's mandatory, or making sure that the PSC is forcing the utilities companies to really look at these advanced technologies rather than putting in new transmission lines. Some of these new advanced technologies, you can get 20 to 40% more electricity on the same lines that you have. So why are we destroying communities by putting new transmission lines in when we can use the current lines that are out there, just changing the technology? There is going to be a solar energy reform bill that is coming out there. And what we're really looking at is solar is really the cheapest way for us to be building and sourcing electricity. And another beauty of solar is you never heard a country going to war over solar. So this really gives us true energy independence. And some of these bills are really looking at ways of how we can really increase the use of solar in the state of Maryland. This bill will also allow for what we call balcony solar. So that is the ability for local people to buy a solar panel. So going over to someplace like Lowe's, buying a solar panel and just plugging it in to their electrical outlet, and therefore providing some of their electricity. Not a whole lot, but some electricity. And if everybody in the state of Maryland would be doing that, we could be supplying a tremendous amount of electricity for everybody. So there's really going to be about 7 bills on data centers. There's another one on data center clean capacity. This really says if a data center comes into the state of Maryland, we would like them, if they want to have tax breaks, we'd like them to have battery backups at the data center. So in case that there's a peak electrical use time to prevent brownouts, the data center would use their battery backup for 3 to 4 hours until the peak time is over. This really helps protect users on the grid, all of us ratepayers, and avoid brownouts. So there's also some savings acts for the grid itself. Again, we really want to have the grid to be really advanced technology. Another one on data centers, which is saying that we should just repeal the data center tax breaks in entirety. So if the other data center bills don't pass, this one would repeal our tax breaks entirely and just say to the wealthiest companies in the world, you can come to Maryland, but we're not going to subsidize you. This one, the TCA, that was already covered. So this is another bill that was presented by our own Mark Adelson, District 46 in Baltimore. Here's one for something that really kind of comes up with as we move away from gas stations. What do we do with gas stations? And this really allows a better retail conversion of these gas stations. So if we're looking at the city of Baltimore, how many gas stations do we have? How many will we need in the future? And how do we transition them to other types of property? And this one really would help that transition. The bottle bill, this is something that it's been already covered already. And the next one is migrating PFAS and biosolids. So this is dealing with biosolids that we get. And so if we look at the city of Baltimore, we're going to be getting biosolids at our waste disposal plants, when we do the sewage treatment. And this is a bill to make sure that we're really managing that properly and making sure that when those PFAS come into our sewage treatment plants, we know what to do, how to manage them, and where they can and cannot sell the end product from these our sewage treatment plants. And this really protects a whole lot of farmland that's out there and individual households that will buy these biosolids and think that they're pollution free, which unfortunately PFAS are in almost everything that we use, and they go through our bodies and then really go into our sewage system. The Cherish Act, this is something that was again covered earlier. The one thing I would ask is if the sustainability group could actually even do more, and that is testify for the Cherish Act. So that'd be something great. I know in the past the city of Baltimore has testified for it, and it'd be great if the Sustainability Commission could also make that effort to come and put a positive testimony in for that to help preserve and save lives in the city of Maryland, or in the city of Baltimore. There's one with phasing out PFAS. So this is looking at consumer protection. A lot of PFAS go into a lot of products that we have, and this is looking for ways that how do we make sure that when things are manufactured, they're not going to be containing PFAS. And if they contain PFAS, usually they come into our system, our bodies, and then it causes all sorts of effects. And then at the end, they go out of our bodies and into our sewage treatment places. So we just want to make sure that we stop PFAS where they initially are coming into our system. And then there's the climate lawsuit authorization. This will allow the state of Maryland to actually sue fossil fuel companies for misleading us on the climate. So we know the fossil fuel companies have known that burning fossil fuels is going to be causing climate change since the early 70s. They've been misleading the public and saying that they're producing things cleanly, and they continue to do that with misinformation. This allows the state of Maryland to sue those companies. sort of similar to how we went after the opioids and after the cigarette industries. This would allow us to do that with the fossil fuel companies. And then there's another bill on data centers. This bill is actually looking at making sure that communities and municipalities are doing proper planning for data centers. So as you heard Kirsten say, they're looking at a data center in Baltimore County. They're looking at this in about 15 other counties in the state of Maryland, probably coming to Baltimore sometime. And this one would require the city to have a plan to really figure out how do we tell people about the data center, how do we involve the community in data centers, how do we prepare the community for that, what kind of planning do we need for as far as water. Usually they come with diesel generators, noise, and so how do we really work to make sure that if they're coming into a neighborhood that it is an appropriate place for that to happen. There's going to be one on pesticides and really saying that let's reduce some of the pesticides that we have in our neighborhoods because we're killing a lot of bugs that should not be killed. A lot of these pesticides also have PFAS in it. So how do we look at restricting those? And then a ban on chemical recycling. This is something that is looking at happening at Howard County. So we're looking at how do we do this for the entire state of Maryland. And then there's the Local Clean Air Act. This one is to allow cities like Baltimore to have stricter regulations on clean air than the state of Maryland. Essentially, Baltimore initially passed a law saying that they were going to do this, and it was thrown out by the federal court. This will reintroduce this type of capability to allow Baltimore to have more stringent air and water pollution controls than what MDE is having out there. So this would allow us as a city to say, even though if the state allows it, this should not be allowed in the city of Baltimore. Something for electronics recycling. So this is something that we truly need in the state of Maryland is better electronics recycling. The CEF funding bill was talked about already by Kirsten. There's also going to be, I'm sorry I'm going fast, but I just want to do this quickly. And again, you can look at all these slides yourselves and listen to the speakers. There's one on quiet communities, and this one is actually looking at getting rid of gas-driven leaf blowers. We know they're very dangerous to the people operating them as far as the pollution and also the noise, both air and noise pollution. And it's something that we know we can use electric leaf blowers, and in the end, electric leaf blowers are cheaper to operate because of the battery packs, and you're not buying gasoline. So we're just looking at doing that. And that's really about it. If I open it up for questions, let's see if I can hear you again. So,
You hear us?
yeah, I do hear you. I don't know if you have any questions or not. And again, if you have want to see the whole presentations and everything, they're in the what I pasted in the chat. I'll paste it in there again.
Thank you.
Otherwise,
Appreciate it.
If you stop sharing your screen, I think then we'll be able to see more easily if anybody has any questions.
okay, I'm stopped, so it should be done.
Not seeing any questions here. I don't see any, but all great bills.
I do have a question about some of these bills that, I'm curious about, for instance, the pesticides. bill and the noise bill. So, in the case of Baltimore, they've outlawed, you're no longer allowed to use gas-powered leaf blowers, right? And yet my so-called environmental neighbors hire staff who use gas-powered leaf blowers all the time. So I guess, I guess some of these, I wonder, you have these policy changes, these bills, but at some point they feel just like for show. I mean, there's no clear way that they get enforced. And I'm wondering, in the case of where these are pertaining to residential properties, how they're going to be enforced.
Some of that is very difficult to enforce. It's up to the local jurisdictions, and that may be something that you have to be tattling on your neighbor and hopefully getting somebody to issue a ticket on. The other part that goes along with these is really stopping the sale of these devices. So that's the other parts of these bills, is to really look at phasing out the actual sales of these devices. So that would be, in a couple of years, you no longer can go to Home Depot and really be looking for a gas-powered leaf blower and things like that. So unfortunately, that doesn't stop it today, but it really moves things along into the future.
And Morgan, I think that one bill, it may have referred specifically to state operations and procurement standards. So I think it was more so referring to state, to kind of what can be procured or used by the state government.
Got it. And Aaron also put something in chat about 311 now allows you to submit a report.
If there are no additional questions for Dave, thank you, Dave.
Yep. Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and move on to the legislative actions adopted in the plans from the office.
Do you want me to go through that, or is Ava going through that?
Yeah.
Or?
If you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can go, Valerie.
Wasn't sure. All right. Let's pull up the slides. Hi, everyone. I'm Valerie Roop. I'm the Climate Resilience Program Manager for Office of Sustainability. I'm just going to talk a little brief overview about some of the actions related to legislation that are in some of our plans. So, as I know you all know, there's a lot of actions in our plans, over 600 in the sustainability, climate action, disaster preparedness, and relevant portions of the solid waste management plan alone. So there's a lot, they're broken in various categories and different ways of moving them forward. And several of them are around require either legislative action or some kind of policy. So some of the common areas around legislation were really around building requirements, waste and pollution and noise reduction. And then, within there, there's different types. There's some of the more general, broad laws, ordinances that are, rules, regulations, things like that. But then there's also ones that could be approached through studies and plans, through incentives, which will require some funding from budgets, or code changes. And then there are also some other actions too. Some of those could be accomplished through legislation or through executive or administrative action. A lot of those relating to capital improvement and city operations. So around building requirements, because there are a lot of them, I'm not going to touch on every single one of them, but just wanted to raise some of them to share with folks so they can have an idea of what's happening. And if there's ever any interest in anybody who's on the calls and looking at how to move these forward, we're certainly happy to talk, in terms of what the city is doing and where there might be some momentum happening already. So around building requirements, there's a lot of different things around, looking at, storing of hazardous materials, benchmarking legislation for all, not just for all buildings, not just for municipal buildings. So, ones that are around institutions and commercial and so on. And then residential as well. There are a number around new construction. So, in a lot of those, going back and making the changes can be difficult, but when there's new construction or significant renovations made, there's an opportunity for some legislation to be able to change how some approaches. So for instance, making sure that there's enough space for recycling and composting in new buildings and fossil-free new construction, or, low emission ready construction. And then, pedestrian, just making sure that it's a space that is useful in many different ways. So it's promoting our pedestrian activity and transit use, as well as, providing open space and cooling and so on in the space as well. And then, looking at some of the very practical pieces like redundant operating systems in any of our new critical facilities so that those don't go offline. And then during point of lease and sale is another point that there's a good opportunity to be able to make some changes. So, looking at, the energy and use disclosures, even just so people know what they're getting into when they're leasing or buying a new property. Waste, of course, is a big one. So there's, some thematically, really around increasing recycling. You see that some of these are in bold and italics, and that's because there are some bills that we are aware of that are promoting this already. So those are right in line with our plans, like, banning recyclable materials from landfill incineration and, requiring deposits as, something we're just learning a little bit about. Of course, single-use bans or fees, for plastic bags or other kind of single-use plastics, and packaging waste reduction. Really looking at how to use reusable packaging and refillables when possible. And then, of course, also in waste, looking at food waste diversion, that's a big one. There's a lot of effort going on within the city to look at, composting facilities and things like that. But that's just one piece of that is composting. There's a lot of other things around, looking at different kinds of liability protections, being able to change the laws around that so that organizations or individuals could be, salvaging food and diverting it from waste, but giving to people who need it. And then, of course, looking at some landfill bans on, blanket landfill bans on organic materials and so on, kind of supporting some of those pieces I was speaking of earlier. Deconstruction and C&D waste is another big piece of opportunity that there's a lot of what mentioned in the plans around. So that's really around deconstructing those buildings, and what are we doing with those materials afterwards? What kind of requirements we might have as a city. To mandatorily divert some of these materials. And then disclosure is another one. In some areas where we can't, we want to know more about, really what it is that people are bringing into the city, how many miles are traveling to here, because those greenhouse gas emissions stay here regardless of where the waste is coming from. So having some disclosure around that, around tonnage of materials and so on. And then also on the flip side about how businesses or organizations or any kind of non-residential entities might be their recycling rates as well, to learn more about that, to see who's making sure to do their recycling diligently. And then noise and pollution and noise reduction is another area where there is some recalls for legislation. Really, around waterway, different pesticides and, things that influence our waterways, noise pollution around some best practices there. And then, several different ways around, vehicular greenhouse gas emission reduction, stopping idling and, really looking at how to reduce freight vehicles, and things along those lines. Then there are some in there as well that are, really around studies and plans and assessments. So these are ones that, could potentially be done internally, or it might call for legislation to direct the agencies to undertake some of these plans. So they really do, there are several different types of these, within there. So they really do kind of run the gamut in terms of climate and action and sustainability. So, really looking at, locations for solar farms, kind of going back to that route optimization about not idling with the fleets, but optimizing the municipal routes, and transitioning to lower no emission fleets, having car-free areas, reducing pollutants at the wastewater processing, at our waste facilities in general. Sorry, we do have some of our wastewater as well. That I'll get to in a moment. And then, again, around that point of sale lease, but this one really specifically exploring like how to do a electrification ordinance, which would be, converting different equipment in households into electric, at point of sale or lease. Those could have a lot of ramifications, so a study would probably be needed before any, bills could move forward. Then a number of different risk assessments around the sewage treatments, sewage treatment overflows, their vulnerability, if there should be large storms, upgrading prioritization for current water systems, and then raising the bulkhead height around the shoreline. So those are some risk assessments specifically called for. And then, a number of plans that could happen internally, but, they might also, be something that are called legislatively around net zero plans for the city and things along those lines. And one of those is transitioning the city to lower zero emission off-road vehicles and tools. And there was a bill in city council around, leaf blowers being fossil fuel free and so on. Another piece in there that, isn't overtly legislation, but could be because of budgetary implications are incentives. There are a number of things that, that the plans call for incentivizing people to adopt their practices. So, around energy efficiency, appliances and electrification, rooftop technologies similarly, but then also things around micro mobility and accessing transport friendly programs and infrastructure and so on. So there's a number of different incentives that could come out of that. Then also, as I mentioned, some of these could be approached, administratively or with bills, depending on how they are. So I just noted these just so folks can see kind of more of those policy pieces that we were talking about as well. So, updating the capital improvement process, to look at, different things related to climate data and social vulnerability. Life cycle evaluations for energy savings and emission reduction options in the city's CIP requests. Capital improvement process requests. And, looking at different things for new and renovated buildings as well with this, around this is specific to municipal buildings, but fossil fuel free new construction, electric ready and solar ready buildings, and energy efficient and low water use equipment used in those buildings. Of course, having pre-wiring and generators for all facilities designated as critical. There are a number of things in here on the critical facilities through the disaster preparedness plan to really just make sure that those buildings stay functional and online should emergencies happen, so they can help the city with its response to any kind of emergency. And then, backup solar powered street lights, transitioning those, and then raising the streets in flood prone areas. A few others, one that, we're working within the sub cabinet a little bit this year and kind of getting rolling as the year progresses is around green procurement. So, really how the city is contracting others, how we're, what we're looking at when we're sourcing our supplies and so on, in terms of making sure that those are sustainable processes, that we're prioritizing sustainable products. And then, of course, looking at how we might, eliminate insecticides in the city's use on, city properties, and, different organic land care policies related to city properties. And then, again, kind of similar to some of those in the public generally, but, looking at how we can salvage materials, composting, collecting performance standards for trash as well. So we know, we have some standards that we can comply with. And then, really looking at a few other pieces around reducing consumption of fuel, fossil fuels, and integrating food system priorities across the government. So, some of these, again, could be enacted administratively, but sometimes, as we know, there are sometimes bills that are called, that, do call for some of these pieces to expedite that work to happen. So just, the few examples there, and there's a lot of information. So if anyone has any questions or would, we'll certainly share that information as well in the slides. But if anyone has any questions or something they'd like to discuss, happy to. Looks like there's one in the chat. Has the city taken position on promoting mass timber construction? Not that I'm aware of, that we've taken a position on that yet. Apologize, I just realized my camera was off.
The reason I suggested is because it may be, in terms of reducing carbon footprint of buildings, that mass timber avoids the use of steel or greatly minimizes the use of steel and concrete. It's easier to construct and it's less expensive. And, Baltimore, that kind of Baltimore's the kind of city where mass timber construction works really well because they're not building 30-story buildings. And, and it can go from residential to up to 18 stories for mass timber. It's also more fire resistant than steel. And, it seems to me that there are numerous different ways of the city working. It could have requirements, but it could also play a role in helping the adoption of mass timber construction in the city, and could be a way to achieve numerous goals within the sustainability plan. And it's one of the few places where the federal government's looking to be helpful.
Okay. Well, I'm not aware of that, but that is certainly something I think that, sounds like you're very knowledgeable on it. So we can have to look into it and hear more from you about that.
Sure. And I'm happy to help you with it.
Thank you. So these are a lot of different things that could potentially be advanced, and just kind of helping to anchor, as you're thinking about what could be advanced, what are in the plans. We're always happy to chat about that, and, appreciate any momentum moving forward.
What stops the city from replacing its fleet of vehicles, its gas-powered vehicles, with electric vehicles? I think
really, in the practical terms, now this is not, coming from the agency itself, this is just from me. I think it's, right now we have a lot of vehicles that are in service that are viable. So, decommissioning those and acquiring new ones is a big expense. We also would need to make sure that the folks who work on the vehicles and maintain them are able to, are trained to do so on electric vehicles, because that is quite different. So that is something that, we had when we were creating the climate action plan that was flagged, as that would be, it's a need for that. So, certainly not preventing it, but just, another piece of that. So I think it's, mostly that we have, as things are decommissioned, we don't yet have a rule, I believe, that, that requires replacing with EVs at this point. But, like that, at this point, we do have, the vehicles that are in use, it's just an expense to be able to decommission those, procure a new one, and so on, when we have viable vehicles already in the fleet. So yeah, there should be that's right. There is that one was signed already. I apologize. Yeah. So there will be procurement of zero emission vehicles by 2030.
Okay. Thanks.
And I was going to add to that a part of it that I know that the Department of General Services is working on is also making sure that the city is able to implement charging infrastructure in the locations where certain agency vehicles are kept or kind of staged. And so that's another piece of it, as far as making sure that we have, in addition to having the vehicles, that we have the infrastructure to make sure that they can be charged.
Right. Thank you.
And we definitely are open to additional discussion, but I also wanted to circle back to Dave had mentioned at the end of his presentation, encouraging folks to testify. And so I wanted to also give Ava a chance to speak to the guidance that we've received that we want to pass along to the commission members about testimony.
Yep, definitely. Thank you, Amy. Good evening again, everyone. So our Mayor's Office of Government Relations, they coordinate bill responses for any state bill across the city government. And generally, when people are representing the city of Baltimore, we really want to speak with one voice. And so for any position that the commission takes on a bill, that has to be a position that the administration takes on the bill. And so we'll be coordinating very closely with our colleagues in the mayor's office and on the government relations team to ensure that there's no confusion about what the position is. And we internally agencies will do different analysis on state bills, or kind of like advocate for the city's position on a particular bill. But I know that's been somewhat of a point of confusion in the past, but we want to make it clear to all sustainability commissioners when speaking on a state bill. In your capacity as a sustainability commissioner, you are representing the city of Baltimore. We have to ensure that that's approved by the administration and that it's clear like what that position is. And so, again, we'll be working really closely with everyone to make sure there's clear expectations and communications around that, in coordination with the appropriate mayor's office staff. If anyone has any questions about that, please definitely feel free to ask. We want to make sure everyone's clear. And I know with our commissioners that we're waiting for you to be kind of like official. So there's no kind of official kind of like statements or testimonies anyone can submit currently at this time. But we do know that the legislative session is a really robust time for engagement for the commission, and we will be kind of coordinating those opportunities to support various types of environmental legislation as they arise. And just one other point that I did raise. We're as commissioners, there is an opportunity to present, based on all the information that you learned here this evening, a list of legislative priorities to the administration. And I think that's something we can dig into a little bit deeper during the legislative committee. Obviously, given that the session has already started, we're 8 days in. It's a little late, and it could be that, we ensure that there's better planning for next year. And again, we apologize for the timing around when folks got confirmed and that it didn't line up as we would have preferred. But there is an opportunity for that this year, and we definitely want to make sure in 2027 there's a clear legislative like priorities that the commission is able to communicate proactively.
All right. Well, any other announcements or points of interest?
Jared, if we are kind of done with most of the kind of planned presentations and discussion, and we have additional time, I did want to raise to commission members in our meeting, Ava and I meet with the co-chairs to kind of pull together the agendas for meetings, and we discussed kind of on a quarterly basis, discussing with the commission topics of interest related to the themes and topics identified for the meetings. And so if we have a little bit of time here before we get to 6 o'clock, we could potentially discuss interests related to the topics for February and March, to both share what we kind of have in mind and also get feedback as far as if folks have ideas for speakers or things that you would be interested in having us include in those meetings. So the February meeting topic is related to Maryland General Assembly updates and environmental policies. And so since the session is ongoing, I think that potentially is a time to discuss coordination of the legislative committee and updates on things that have progressed in the session. Our team within the Office of Sustainability is also working on some code updates, and we are hoping that that those will be far enough along that we could potentially provide a briefing either in February or March on the work that our team is doing. But I'm happy to hear other thoughts as far as suggestions for speakers or topics. And then while folks are thinking about February as far as interest in topics, March, the topic would be watershed planning and coastal resilience. And so talking about why watershed planning is critical, and our team working on the watershed master plan that we mentioned the meetings in the beginning of the meeting, we can provide updates on that process. And I think I saw a hand. Jen?
Yeah, thank you. So it just sort of dawned on me that it might be interesting for us in February to hear from somebody on the Mayor's Office of Government Affairs to learn what the city or the Mayor's Office may already be prioritizing relative to legislation either at the state or with the council that might be adjacent to any of our sustainability plans, our disaster preparedness plans, or anything like that, so that we have a little bit of a better perspective on what the mayor's office may be prioritizing.
Thanks for that suggestion.
At the risk of sounding also on the flip side, the negative, it would be also helpful to know what they're not supporting. Not that their lack of support is a bad thing, but it would be good to know what not only what are they supporting, but what are they not supporting.
Thanks for those suggestions, and I will see what we can do with coordinating with MOGR for February. And I'll also reiterate the request the next time I send an email to the commission, so that you can potentially send additional ideas as you think of them. And I'll also send the full list of meeting topics so that folks can keep that in mind going forward.
There are no other questions or comments. I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. I'll bring this meeting to a close for the day if no one has any other questions or concerns. And we will see you all for the next meeting, which is going to be February the 28th. I'm sorry, February the 18th. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Stay warm, stay
Thanks,
safe.
everyone.